Hello everyone, welcome back to Xcoding with Alvian. In this video, we're going to continue to explore the Diffable data source snapshot implementation in collection view. We're going to add editing mode in the collection view. With this, we should be able to reorder and delete items. Next, we're going to add the selected accessories checkmark. And finally, we're going to add swipe to delete feature. Let me demo the collection view editing features that we will build. There is an edit button on the left side of the navigation bar. When I tap this button, the collection view enters the editing mode. Each cell has the delete and reordering accessories. I can delete a character by tapping on the delete accessory. To move a character, I can just drag on the reordering accessory and move it to any new position that I want, even to different sections. Now, let me toggle the edit mode off. When I tap and select a cell, the accessory checkmark is shown. I can unselect by tapping again. I can even select multiple characters. Finally, I can swipe on a cell to reveal the delete button. I can just swipe over to delete the character. That's it for the demo. Let's begin to implement the feature and start coding. Before we begin, please download the starter project from the GitHub repository link I provided at the description below. The starter project contains the code from the previous video, intro to Diffable data source, and search with combine. The collection view uses the new Diffable data source and snapshot API as the data source. There's also a search feature that uses the combine publisher subject to observe, filter, and apply the new snapshot based on the text typed by the user. I recommend you to follow the previous video before continuing on this video. I've provided the link to the video at the description below. Now, let's open the starter project in Xcode. Navigate to this character list view controller. Let me give you a brief walkthrough of the components that we'll be using. First, we have a backing store array, which is an array containing tuples of sections struct and array of characters struct. Next, we have the data source property, which is the UI collection view Diffable data source. It uses the section and character structs as the section identifier and item identifier. Next, we have the cell registration and header registration properties. They are used to register the queue and configure the cell and supplementary header view for the collection view. You can learn on how to implement it by following the modern cell registration video from the link at the description below. Next, we have the list layout property, which is the list compositional layout configured using the collection layout list configuration. I've also covered this in the list in collection view video. Please watch the video from the link at the description below if you haven't. Next, inside the view did load, I configured the collection view, data source, navigation bar items, search bar, search stack observer, the data source, and apply the initial snapshot using the backing store. That's basically it for the starter project. Next, let's move on to implement the select character feature with checkmark. To begin, our select feature is capable of selecting multiple characters. We need to store the selected characters in a state. There are several ways to implement this. First, we can add an isSelected property to the character struct and add it here as a comparison inside the equality check. With this, we should be able to retrieve the selected character, toggle the isSelected property, and update the backing store, then construct a new snapshot based on the updated backing store and apply it to the data source. The second approach is to store the selected characters in a set property. With this, we can just retrieve the character, update the set, and reload the snapshot with the updated character. I prefer to use the second approach, which is to store the selected characters in a set property. I think this will be much simpler to implement. as we don't have to find the section index and character index in the backing store array. Then update and construct a new snapshot. Now let's navigate to the top of the source file, and below the data source property, declare a new private property named selected characters and assign it with empty set of characters struct. The characters struct already conforms to hashable using the ID as the unique hash value. Now let's move on to the setup collection view method. Inside the cell registration, here just declare a new property named accessories with the type of UI cell accessory. Assign it with empty array. And here we need to check the set where it contains the character. If yes, we are going to append the checkmark accessory. And let's also pass the displayed state to when not editing. Need to add stuff here. This will make sure the checkmark is only shown when the collection view is not in the editing state. Finally, assign the cell.accessories property with this accessories array property. Next, we need to handle the event where when the user tap on the cell using the collection view delegate. So let's assign the collection view delegate as the view controller. Let's navigate to the bottom here, and we are going to conform to the UI collection view delegate for a new extension character list view controller. Conform to UI collection view delegate, and the method that we need to implement is collection view select item at index path. So here we need to retrieve the character from the data source based on the index path. We can use the data source item identifier passing the index path. If it is nil, we just return. Here we need to check the set. If it contains the character, we just need to remove it from the set. If not, we need to insert it inside the set. Next, we need to retrieve the current snapshot from data source. We can use the data source.snapshot method here. And then we can just invoke snapshot.reload items, passing the character. And finally, we need to invoke the data source apply, passing the new snapshot, animating differences as true, and we don't need the completion. Okay, this will reload the cell containing the character. Now let's try to build and run it using the live preview. This is a Shift UI live preview. Tap on this play button to interact. Now let's tap several character. Nice. Okay, the selection works. Now let's unselect. Okay, nice. Now let's move on to the next task, adding edit mode to the collection view. First, let's add the edit bar item at the left side of the navigation bar. Navigate to the setup bar items method here. And to do this, we can just use the navigation item left bar button item and assign it with the edit button item property. This will return the system provided edit button and invoke the set editing method when tapped. We need to override the view controller set editing method. There are two parameters provided, editing and any method. Editing will be true when we enter edit mode and will be false when we exit. Make sure to call super set editing here, passing the two parameters. And then we just need to invoke collection view is editing, passing the editing parameter. This will trigger the edit mode inside the collection view. Now let's navigate back to this cell registration here inside the assignment of UI cell accessory. Here we need to assign the first element with delete accessory, and we are going to only show this when editing. Next, we need to add this action handler here. Let it empty for now. And the next accessory will be the reorder. Same, we also want to show this only in editing mode. Okay. Now let's try to build the app. Tap on the edit button. Nice. It enters the editing mode and show the delete and reorder accessory. Currently, it is not working. And if we tap on this done button, it will exit the edit mode. Okay. Let's move on to implement the delete handler next. Let's add a private method named delete character. And we are going to pass a single parameter, which is a character struct. We will be also using this method later when we implement the swipe to delete feature. First, we need to retrieve the index path for the character inside the data source. For that, we can use data source index path for passing the character. If it is nil, we can just return. Well, just removing the item from the snapshot sure works with no problem. We also need to remove the character from the backing store using the index path. We can use the index path section to retrieve the section and then access the characters and invoke remove add passing the index path.item. Okay. Next, we also need to remove the characters inside the set. And finally, we can retrieve the current snapshot of the data source and invoke delete items as in an array containing the character. Finally, we can just invoke apply, passing the new snapshot and animating differences as true. Okay. And now we need to invoke this inside the delete accessory action handler. Let's add the weak self here. And here we can just use self delete character, passing the character. Okay. Now let's try to build and run. Let me tap on edit here and let me delete this character, this one. Nice, it works without a problem. Let's move on to implement the reordering feature. To be able to handle reordering using the Diffable source, Apple provides the reordering handlers property. We need to assign handlers for can reorder item and did reorder item property. Navigate to the setup data source. Let's assign the data source reordering handlers can reorder item. Here we need to assign a closure with a parameter of the item identifier, which is the character, and the return type of Boolean. Here we just want to enable reordering if the search bar text is empty. To do this, we can use the navigation item search controller search bar the text. As this can be nil, we need to provide a default value, which is an empty string, and we are going to use is empty. So basically, if the search bar text is empty, we will enable the reordering. Next, let's assign the data source reordering handlers git reorder property with a closure. Here it passed the transaction containing the initial snapshot, final snapshot, and the difference. And the return type itself is void. Here we just need to update the backing store characters array in the associated section with the final snapshot of the characters inside the section identifier. First, let's assign the backing store array to a property named backing store. Next, we need to loop the transaction.section transaction array. Then we can retrieve the section identifier using the section transaction.section identifier. Next, we need to retrieve the section index from the transaction final snapshot index of section, passing the section identifier. With this, we should be able to retrieve the section inside the backing store and then update the character with the section transaction final snapshot dot items. Okay. And we need to assign the backing store with this updated backing store. And as the user can move the character across sections, we need to also update the headers using this reload headers. This will update the visible headers using the latest data from the snapshot. That's basically it. Before we build and try this, I want to make a slight modification to the cell style. In this case, I want to assign it with UI list content configuration with the value cell style. Okay. And I want to set the image size to 24. Set the corner radius to 12. Now let's try to build and run this. Okay, this should be easier to drag around. Now let's tap on the edit button. Let's move a character. Nice, it works. Now let's move it to a different section. Nice. Cool, right? Now let's move on to implement the final task, which is to add the swipe to delete feature. This should be pretty simple. Navigate to the list layout property declaration. Here we can use the UI collection layout list configuration, trailing swipe actions configuration provider. Other than this, it also provides the leading if you want to use that. But in this case, we want to enable the swipe from the trailing edge. So we'll use this one. Here we need to provide the closure with the index path as the parameter and the return type of UI swipe actions configuration. It is an optional. Okay. First, we need to retrieve the character from the data source using the item identifier, passing the index path. If it is nil, we just return nil. And then to continue, we return the UI swipe actions configuration, passing the actions here. It is an array of UI contextual action. Let's initialize a UI contextual action. For the style, it will be destructive. And for the title, it will be delete. And for the handler, we only need this completion. Okay, let's declare weak self here. Okay, here we just need to invoke the let character, passing the character, and finally we need to invoke the completion, passing through. Okay, that's it. Now let's build and run. Okay, let's click on this resume. Okay, now let me try to delete a character. Nice, just works. You can just tap on this. Okay, that's it for the swipe to delete feature. That's it for this video. We have successfully added editing features such as reordering, delete, selection checkmark to the collection view using Diffable data source. Before Diffable data source and list compositional layout, implementing these features were pretty hard. I encourage you all to build more amazing things with all of this new, simple API provided by Apple. Please like the video and subscribe to keep supporting this channel forward. Until then, keep the lifelong learning goes on. Bye.